Welcome to the Huff-N-Stuff podcast, where we talk about board games, card games, and anything in the tabletop hobby. We're so glad you joined us, because we have loads of great stuff from our contributors like Perception Check. So sit back, relax, and join our show. And here we go!
Hey, psst, come here. Yeah, you, come here. Who do you think I'm talking to? This is April 26, 2014. Nothing personal, happy index. Yeah, that's right. Sit down. You're gonna listen to the boss talk right now.
Following over here. When did I ever refuse?
Welcome to the Huff-N-Stuff podcast, where today we're going to talk about nothing personal, happiness ratings, of course, word of the day, and all those things that we normally have on the show. And today I am joined by my good friend, Ben Imes. Say hello, Ben.
Hello, everybody.
You know, Ben's a little new to this, and we're trying some new software through Google+. So if the connections sometimes sound a little bit off, then you guys will know why. Hopefully you'll stay with us here. So let's get into it.
And I refuse to be a fool.
Hey guys, now it's time to talk about what we've been playing recently.
That's right, Elise. We're going to talk about what we've been playing recently. And Ben, why don't you jump in? What have you been playing recently? At home or at the store or something? What have you been playing?
Yeah, you know what? I've been playing some King of Tokyo. I've heard a lot about that. Never got it to the table before. And
wow,
played that
really?
Yeah, I've never played it.
Wow.
And I loved it. It was very fast. I got stopped really quickly. I think we played it with 6 players, and it was a lot of fun. Went fast, turns were fast, which was nice. Nothing really dragged. So that's a good game. I like it. Anybody can really pick it up. Pretty easy to learn, and a lot of fun.
Yeah, I saw it over there with one of the guys pulled out the game. In fact, I think it was Stevens, and he let you guys borrow it, and you guys look like you're having a great time. There are 2 guys that look like they had been with the store for a while. Like I think one of them had worked with the store for a while there, and you guys broke it out, and everyone was screaming and rolling the dice. It sounded like you guys had a great time.
Oh yeah. It's a great game, and the more people you have, I think the more fun it is. And if you can really get into it, it's a lot of fun. So
yeah, it's true. That game scales better with more. Although if it was just you, your wife, and your son or something, that would also work.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about that one. Kids can play it and pick it up really easy. You know, I'm not sure if my son, who's 3, could pick it up, but 5, 6, pretty easy.
Right. In time, when he gets a little bit older, he's going to love that one.
Oh, I'm so excited for that.
Of course, in time, you'll want to get it before it goes out of print, because all these games in time go out of print, of course.
Yeah.
Sad to say.
On eBay for that, yeah.
Yeah, and then you'll pay like $150 for it, so you want to get it now.
For King of Tokyo, yeah.
Yeah. One game that I got to play last Saturday was Small World. I played it before a long time ago. This was the second time I got to play it, and it was fun. The whole thing with, I don't know if you've played Small World, but it has...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like it. It's a good one. I think
it has a function on it. If you're not doing as well as you can go on to another race. That's a very interesting mechanic that they have, where you'll go into decline. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's a fun mechanic, and I haven't seen it in too many other games before. So, yeah, I agree. And, that's one that a lot of new people can pick up. It's because there's not a lot of, dice rolling and that sort of stuff. It's pretty easy to figure out the combat system and everything. So
yeah, it's definitely one that I could see women getting into an area control game, because I can't see my wife or most wives wanting to play Risk, but I can see them playing this game.
Right.
So
yeah, and my wife actually likes Small World a lot. So.
Oh, really? So she's tried it too, huh?
Yeah. We have that game. Now I don't have the Undergrounds expansion. Or is that the one it is?
Yeah, the Undergrounds, yeah.
Yeah, and I've heard that one's not actually as good, but I like the base game, and then there's a couple expansions for the base game that adds a couple new races that we have, and they're all good. So
well, last time they had at the Imperial Outpost, they had a used game sale that they'll have twice a year. I saw that Underground, 2 of them, so you might want to go there next time. Maybe you'll see it again.
Pick one up. Yeah.
Because it was, I think they were selling it for $15. I mean, you can't lose with that. What other game have you played recently?
You know what? I finally got to the table Descent Second Edition, which is a game I picked up probably 3 or 4 months ago. I'm really been meaning to get it to the table. And one of the guys brought it to game night, and he had all his miniatures painted, and he's been playing this a ton. So he was able to run the game, explain everything to us. It was a great game. It's your kind of your dungeon crawl sort of game. And have you played it yet?
Well, I played it last week, but I'm saving that for another episode. But yes, I played it last week at Imperial Outpost with the same guy, because his name is Brian and his girlfriend's name is Sarah. And so I asked him, I said, after you guys were done, I said, hey, Brian, would you mind bringing that next time? Sure enough, brought it last week, and we played it, and the same one you had, or you got to play. And we played the entire 4 hours. We played like an extended version of it. And I'm going to leave my impressions of it for next podcast that we do. I do have to say that's a solid game.
It is, especially if you have somebody who knows what they're doing running the game.
Right. It's just
I think it'd be a little tough to pick it up on your own.
Right. It's just like if you were playing D&D or some kind of an RPG, right? If you have someone who's running it really good at knowing when to put things in, or maybe you want to hold something back, if that guy that's running it knows or is good at that, boy, you're going to have a great time.
Exactly.
The other game that I got to play last Saturday is Among the Stars. Now, this game is a little bit like Race for the Galaxy, although they have square cards. In my last episode, we talked about it because it was a space board games, and Stephen and I talked about Among the Stars. But for you, Ben, I'll give you a little bit of insight to the game. It is a Greek company called Appia who makes the game. It's about building your space station, and the Dice Tower loved it, and they said it was probably one of the better games that came out of 2012, but because
it was published in 2012.
Appia, I don't think have a license to sell to any of the distributors in America. So that's one of the reasons why it was really hard to get. Most women I know aren't interested in direct conflict. So she really likes it. And everyone who's played it so far really loves it. And I got it to the table Saturday and we played it. Everyone was like, wow, this is a great game. It's like Seven Wonders, but in space. I have played Seven Wonders and I don't like it at all. This game I like because of the theme, because it's really interesting when you put these little square cards down and you build like these different shapes like H's and L's, and really interesting. I mean, the way it looks. That's something if you've... Go ahead.
And it looks like the Kickstarter. It looks like the Kickstarter is still going now. So as of this recording, there's still 9 days to go, and they've fully funded. So you'll get whatever you back.
Yeah, well, by the time that we probably post this, it'll be done by then. But if it isn't, to our audience, I would say you need to go check it out, because it's got like 3 different videos on it, and it's got like 2 different expansions, and they're just giving out a ton of free stuff on this Kickstarter. I backed it only because I wanted the expansions. But it's a great game. I can't say enough great about it. Stronghold Games has picked it up, so it'll be distributed here more popularly. And that's what we've been playing recently.
Hey now! We got something new and exciting for you guys! No! Video games are off the hook! So why don't we talk about that with our newest team, the Game Detective, with Jason and Steven. Okay, take it away, guys!
Video Game Detectives.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first segment. I'm your host, Jason Griffin, and with me I have my partner in crime.
What's good? It's Steven. It's just Steven.
Steven and Jason. So, our segment of the show is going to be about talking about video games and how it's impacted us as gamers, the influences that we see, reviews on new video games, things that we're into, things that we've been playing, things that we've seen, things like that.
It's going to be unique because he and I are both casual, recreational gamers.
Yes.
We both have full-time jobs and families, so we squeeze in gaming when we can. We're going to go through some tips and tricks, probably how to squeeze it in.
Yeah, that's true. Today's topic is going to be what video game made us as gamers, what established us as people who are going to always have a console in the house, what game kept us in it from childhood on to now and has a special relationship with us. I will go first. For me, it was probably Final Fantasy VII. Now, I've been playing video games. I played Atari. You know, I started at Atari. I had a lot of games on Nintendo that were really important to me growing up. You know, because I spent a lot of time playing video games as a kid. It was my form of recreation of choice. So, you know, I played big ones: Contra, Double Dragon, Battletoads. You know, it's pretty standard games. The
excellent games.
Yeah, they're all good games. Most anyone who's played a Nintendo or was around during Nintendo's heyday, you know, has played all those games. But those are not really what made me a gamer. Final Fantasy VII came out on the PlayStation, the first PlayStation.
The gray box.
The gray box. and I don't know. It was, you know, I'd never seen anything like it. I remember going to my brother's wedding in Carolina. I was just starting to be a sophomore in high school. And we went out there to visit that he was marrying into. And we'd never met it before, never heard anything about them. They had a PlayStation, they had Final Fantasy VII, and they were playing that thing like gangbusters, man. They ignored everybody. But I didn't care because I was like, whoa, this is awesome. What's up with these graphics? This is crazy. I've never seen anything like this. I've never even seen a PlayStation. I lived in a small town growing up, so I didn't even know what a PlayStation was at the time. So when I watched them play this game, I was like, okay, I'm determined to go get that. So I worked my butt off that summer. I roofed 2 houses and did a bunch of yard work, things like that, saving all my money to buy a PlayStation just so I could get this game. And then I played it, and it's a, you know, I think that was
4 discs,
3 or 4 discs. I think it was, so 4 discs, so much time, an entire summer sunk into this game. And when you get to the part where you played Final Fantasy
I have,
VII,
man.
right?
It is a classic game, yes.
It is a classic game. I consider it the greatest classic game. You would call PlayStation games classic games.
I agree.
But I would consider that the greatest classic RPG of all time, for me personally. So I remember when Aerith dies, when Sephiroth comes down, he stabs her. and I've seen a lot of movies at this time. I've had a lot of things that should pull on your heartstrings. I had animals die. Nothing made me cry like seeing that happen, and I didn't even know why it was happening. I didn't even know why I was crying. I'm like, I don't know if I'm supposed to feel this way. This is stupid. You know, people cry, oh, I'm reading a book and this so-and-so died. You know, I mean, that's the reaction I had with it. So that is why I'm a gamer. That's the type of game that got me into maintaining a casual gamer's lifestyle. That's the game for me that created an emotional connection and caused me to be, you know, someone who's going to have a console. But that was the game for me. So with that, any comments?
Yeah, I mean, for me, you know, those are great games. Final Fantasy is definitely on my top 3 games, but for me, I'm going to go back a little bit further before the PlayStation. I'm going to go with N64, GoldenEye. James Bond, split screen, 4 ways, first-person shooter, the original, best one ever played. GoldenEye. I mean, I spent all day playing that. I would spend all night playing with buddies. It was a game you could play.
That was the first game that really let you do that, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was one of the first games I ever played as a kid that let you play four screens against 4 other guys at the same time. Of course, the graphics now are terrible, but back then it was revolutionary. You know, for me, that was what got me hooked on gaming. Jason and I were both student athletes in high school and a little bit in college for me. But as time has gone on, that classes you're able to evolve and step out of that and be more of a gamer. So for me, it was GoldenEye. But then later on, I got more into my sports games. Of course, Madden. Once that got really big, that was a big deal for me. I have a twin brother, so him and I competed almost in every single thing we ever did. And so we would spend countless hours going head to head with each other playing Madden. But now as I've gotten older and I have less time for stuff like that, I spend a lot of time playing real-time strategy games like Command and Conquer, StarCraft.
Games that you can pick up and kind of walk away from if you need to.
Yeah, basically. I mean, there's time commitment involved in those games, but I spend a lot of time playing those only because it flexes my brain muscles more, I feel like.
Yeah.
The strategy aspect of it. But
I like that too. I kind of do the same thing. I mean, I still love, you know, I'll pick up Call of Duty anytime. And I play that game because first-person shooters are nice to just be able to kind of like basketball out on the court. You play a pickup game, and if you got a little bit of time, and if you got to leave or something, we're casual gamers, so we can put it away and say, you know what, I'm in the middle of a match. Sorry guys, whoops, gotta we're that guy. Yeah, we're that guy. We gotta drop the ball.
Yep. All of a
See you
sudden,
later.
back
And drop off, and the guy just passes out on the ground and disappears altogether, and then you get jacked out of the game because whoops, we were the host. Oh, sorry guys, dinner's ready.
Man.
Gotta
Yeah,
go.
hey, wife came home, we got to bounce out.
Hey, take care of business. So yeah, that's yeah. So we kind of had a similar. I mean, obviously, different genres of games have made the impact for us. I mean, it seems like you liked more of a competitive nature with your brother and the first person shooter aspect of things and the sports games, things like that. I got into sports games a little bit. I played Madden 93 with the Super Nintendo, first Madden game I played, and then NBA Live 95. I played that with my buddy Barrett for like a whole summer. We built our team. We were Lakers fans at the time. When we made our own characters and you could max out the stats.
Yeah.
And at the time, there was no Jordan because he wasn't for some reason he wouldn't sign his rights.
Yeah, he
away.
wouldn't sign rights over, man.
So we would try to build him and put his 23, but then he's playing for the Lakers.
Yeah.
It's so stupid. And it was a good time. I did enjoy those games, and but for me, the RPG aspect was what got me into, because I wasn't into sports at the time when I was that young. I mean, I played sports, but my parents kind of made me.
I wish gaming you learned just as much, but the only thing I learned from gaming really is just patience, really, more than anything else.
Well, see, and I'm on the other side. I think that you're right. I mean, there's a lot of things that we learn from sports about life, and our coaches would always say that. But I think that there is just as much as you can learn from video games. I actually did a paper in high school on the pros and cons of video games as a daily exercise, in your daily life, because the military encourages it because it keeps your brain, active and sharp, because you're having to make split-second decisions, things like that. Your hand-eye coordination is immensely better, especially now with the online. I feel that it gives you a sense of community and there's a social aspect to it. And even though someone's trying to do some inappropriate things to your lifeless corpse on the screen sometimes, and you might get a little upset at that, it's still you're part of a community. Whether you're good or bad, you have a part to play, and you can get better. I think that's important. Being part of any kind of community helps strengthen like a social awareness, and I think that's a benefit from that video games can provide, especially in larger cities, and especially with music and athletics is kind of going by the wayside in high schools and things like that, and kids are looking for alternative ways out. And that's another one of the points, is that decrease in violence. People say a lot of times that video games cause kids to be more violent because they're so violent. But the recent studies have shown, I can't remember what I was watching, I think it was a TED Talks or something like that, and they were saying that this is actually an outlet to get aggression out, so that kids aren't going out and vandalizing things, and they aren't using the aggression in negative ways. They're dealing with it, maybe not in a good way, or maybe not necessarily healthy, but they're not actually doing any damage, on a regular basis, and they're not, they're getting rid of their aggression out on the video game and with their friends, or strangers, versus going out and tearing up the neighborhood and setting stuff on fire. So.
I agree 100%. I mean, I know video games is a good outlet for me. After a long day at work, nothing like coming home and not having to deal with
decompress.
Yeah, decompress basically, and doing something else. Whether it's you're playing an RPG where you're somebody else, or you're playing a sports game where you get to be again somewhere else, or you're playing a first-person shooter where you get to maim and destroy things. It can be constructive at times. I just know for me, it's a lot of fun. I mean, I have a lot of fun gaming. I don't have the whole cyberbullying deal with me. I know for me, it's just not an issue.
And we're a little bit older too, so I don't think it's
I'm
such an issue. We're adults. We're not the type that are going to go do that to others either. That's the love-hate relationships with video games from me and Steven. So, Join us next time on Video Game Detectives, where we discuss the top 5 worst video game adaptations from movies.
But yeah, it's been a pleasure. I can't wait. Spider-Man's coming out recently on Friday here. So on my wife's our tablet, she downloaded that new Spider-Man game for me, and I played it, and it was really hard, and it was not great. So
it was not.
But so that's what sparked the next topic here. So we're gonna go over some of the top 5 worst video game adaptations to movies.
Video games ever.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Yeah, thanks.
Hey guys! We present our newest magical contributor, Perception Check, where Eric and Ken talk about the world of RPG. Yep, that's right, RPGs. Now here they are.
Hello everyone, my name is Ken McNabb, and
my name is Eric.
We are Perception Check. We are your guide into the world of role-playing games. We figured the best place to start would be more or less like a level 0 kind of thing, and just kind of explain what a role-playing game is, and how it differs from your standard board game. Now, RPG or role-playing game is pretty much imagination with rules, I guess would be the easiest way to explain it, wouldn't you say, Eric?
Yes, just picture like a choose-your-own-adventure book, if you've ever played those.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many out there, whether it really depends on what you want to play. If you want it to be something fantasy like Lord of the Rings or something of that sort, or science fiction, say Star Wars, or even there's several different cyberpunk universes out there. And really, it depends on who you are and what you kind of have a feel for.
I always kind of pictured it's like putting on your own stage play, but you're doing it with your friends.
Yeah.
And then one of your friends is trying to kill you.
My buddies in college always, when we tried to explain Dungeons & Dragons to anybody who wasn't part of our group, we said basically we just play imagination for a couple of hours, and This is the story that we come up with. And really that is the meat and potatoes of any role-playing game, is the story. I could go on for hours of all the just mindless stories and crazy situations that have come up in my role-playing groups. So I guess at this point, going along with our level 0 thing would just be the different types of role-playing games. If you were into something like, say, fantasy, like Lord of the Rings, the main one that everybody's heard of is Dungeons & Dragons.
Of course.
And, I mean, there's different variants of that, too. There's different universes. There's Greyhelm, which is your standard D&D. There's Forgotten Realms. There's Oberon, I believe it's called. Eberron, there it is.
Yeah, the steampunky D&D.
It depends on what kind of universe you want within the D&D realm. If you want your normal standard high fantasy, then that's the place to go.
Well, D&D is the one probably the easiest to start with, I'd say. They got right now 4th edition. Obviously D&D Next is coming out, but right now you can go and get 4th edition books and everything. A lot of seasoned players won't like 4th edition. It's very easy.
A lot of people, especially with my old gaming group, gave me a lot of flack for getting rid of my 3.5 stuff and upgrading to 4th edition just because they didn't care for it. And I've heard it tossed around several times that 4th edition, they just made an MMO out of Dungeons and Dragons.
It's a miniature game too.
And it's very easy, very approachable. I mean, I remember back when it was still Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and there was such a thing as THAC0. That was my entry point. Was back when it was still AD&D and it was rolling dice and then taking that number and subtracting it from this number, and then if it was below 0 or whatever, then you hit or you
needed a
miss.
math degree just to figure out if you lifted a box.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, 4th edition, the good thing about that one is actually if you're brand new, starting out, you and your friends just want to try RPGing, you can actually get this thing called a red box. It literally is just a red box, has a picture of a dragon on and everything. And the great thing about that is that it will assign one player Dungeon Master. The other players will have predefined characters they can play. And essentially, it is as close to a choose-your-own-adventure as you can get in an RPG setting. So the DM will read something, the other players will respond, DM can actually see on there, okay, if they do this, do this. It's a great intro just to start. Now, this is if you don't have any friends that play RPGs. That's the thing.
Or even another good way to get your feet wet into the RPG realm would be one of the Dungeons & Dragons box board games that are out there, whether it's The Legend of Drizzt or however you pronounce that name, or I believe there's one for Adventure to Castle Ravenloft even.
And Wrath of
however you pronounce that name.
Something, yeah. So, I mean, D&D 4th edition is definitely a great entry point, but if you're playing with a group, chances are, if you're playing with a seasoned group, chances are they're not going to be interested in 4th edition.
No, they're either going to be playing something either 3.5 or Pathfinder.
Pathfinder is kind of so Dungeons & Dragons, right now they're going on their 5th edition, which is D&D Next. But they've basically been going past, the 70s, I believe?
Yeah, it started, I believe, the late 70s, back when it was run by TSR, and then TSR got bought out by Wizards of the Coast in the late 90s, early 2000s.
And if you ask a lot of players, you'll say D&D really peaked with 3.5. It had a lot of problems. I played 3.5, and I disliked it.
I saw 3.5 as huge leaps and bounds better than Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, which is what I was playing before that, and it made a lot more sense.
Well, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons was just mean. I mean, AD&D was just, how are we going to die today?
Yeah.
I mean, there's campaigns you can go on where the whole goal is to die. Pathfinder, though, is kind of the next iteration of 3.5. They fixed a lot of things I thought were broken in 3.5. And it feels like Pathfinder is, I think, the best RPG out there right now.
I have yet to play it, but just reading through the rulebooks, which I've read recently, I have to agree. It took everything that was great about 3.5, got rid of some of the clunky stuff, fixed some of the other clunky stuff, and just streamlined it without making it to the point of being, and I don't mean this in a derogatory term, but dumbed down, which is how a lot of people feel about 4th edition. Not to say that 4th edition is a bad thing, but it's very simple compared to even 3.5 or Pathfinder.
Sure. And that's not to say that it's really easy. I mean, there's easier RPGs out there. There's the Fate system.
I have never experienced the Fate system,
or the Fudge system, where it's just plus or minus dice. You rolled 4 dice, 2 pluses, a minus, and a blank. Hey, you succeeded because of plus and minus.
I don't know. I always was partial to the White Wolf D10 system for like Vampire, Mage.
The Masquerade, yeah.
Basically, you had a difficulty check for whatever it was you were trying to do, something as simple as even driving a car. You would have a driving check combined with your dexterity, and that would give you so many dice, and say it was a difficulty 7 check. So you roll all those dice, and every number that's 7 or higher is a success, and you need a certain number of successes in order to pass that check. And that's all it was.
Now, if you're listening to that and that sounds completely over your head, that's fine. There's actually even easier RPGs out there. I would argue that the Star Wars, the Fantasy Flight New Star Wars Edition, is extremely easy, extremely heavy on storytelling. I know you haven't tried playing it yet.
I haven't yet, but I'm itching to be honest. I want to do that droid character that we were talking about, the re-implementation of Scud, the disposable assassin.
That definitely needs to happen. But it's much easier. Instead of rolling a d20, which most of the time you'll see in an RPG, you roll these pass and fail dice. So you roll it. If you have more passes and fails, you succeed in what you're doing. The great thing about it is you also roll these advantage and disadvantage die. So you roll these at the same time you're rolling your pass and fail. So you could actually pass something. Say I want to shoot somebody. I shoot him, but I rolled a whole bunch of disadvantage die. The GM or the DM can then make a decision, well, how does that disadvantage you? You made the shot, but something bad happened. So maybe you shot him, but you shot his thermal detonator, and now you're all dead. Now, that wouldn't be an extreme case, but something like that. At one point, you could even, if you missed a shot, but you rolled a bunch of advantage dice, maybe your shot went wide, but you hit a steam pipe, which shot steam into the guy's face, and he's blind for a turn.
Oh, so that really delves more into almost like the imagination of the DM or GM.
Exactly. And that's the thing about that game, is that you need a very good DM. You need a guy who's really has the imagination and can handle those kind of things that are thrown at you. Because if someone succeeds beautifully at something, but they fail a disadvantage, get so many disadvantage dice, it's not even funny, you gotta think on the spot, well, how does that affect the game? What happened?
And I've experienced both sides of the coin with an imaginative GM and a GM who's just kind of like, okay, you did that much damage. He's dead. Whereas I've also experienced ones that will embellish everything. Okay, you hit him, but this is how you did it, and this is what happens because you hit him, and this and that and that and this.
It really comes down to the kind of group you have, and I'm sure we'll talk about that another time. Thanks for joining us on our first ever episode of Perception Check. This has been Eric and Ken. Listen next week where we discuss about how to find the right RPG group, also how to Shanghai your friends into playing Dungeons & Dragons.
And at that meeting, you'll be assassinated.
And now, it's time for Word of the Day.
That's right, Elise. Now it's time for Word of the Day. This time we're going to talk about a term called point salad. It's sort of one of these terms that you're going to be hearing more and more, I think, that a few games came out about a year or two ago that had this, and now it's become like an industry standard. Point salad, let me read it to y'all. It refers to the relative recent school of design in which there are such wide variety of ways to get points that it actually becomes difficult to take actions without getting some amount of points as a compensation. Personally, I think point salad is nothing but good. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, and I have to agree with that, Rob. Again, this is a new term for me. I hadn't heard this before, but, a couple of the newer games you were talking about, like Bruges, is definitely a point salad game. Everything you do in that game gives you points.
That's right.
All over the place.
That's right.
And I feel like Agricola can kind of be point salad. Everything you do in Agricola is giving you points. So that's one of the games that kind of broke into everything for what it is.
Right. Well, Agricola definitely has a little bit of that, but I still don't think that Agricola completely is a point salad. I think that there are other games out there that will get you it, like my favorite, of course, Mage Knight, where you can get all different types of points through spells that you get. All can give you points. Of course, it may not win you the game, but it can definitely help you maybe lagging. There's like two people, and some have even said that Mage Knight is kind of a race game where you're racing towards to get that castle at the end of the scenario. But if you're behind and you still get your castle, but maybe your castle, Castle B, isn't getting you as much points as Castle A, then if you've got all those other spells and all that other stuff, then it can boost you to first place. And this is, if a game has a good point salad, that is awesome. And I know that there are a few big name designers right now that are doing this, and I couldn't be happier because frequently when I play a game and there's only one way to get points, it's kind of frustrating. I mean, what happens if I'm bad at getting that one type of points? Like about a month or two ago, I played for the first time Twilight Imperium. It just happened to be that the cards that were given, that were drawn for I can't think of what you call it. It's like those goals were primarily attacking and aggression type cards. And if you weren't as good at combat as the guy next to you, you weren't probably going to win. And that's one of the reasons I was not keen on Twilight Imperium. Have you had any experience?
Right, yeah. With like Lords of Waterdeep, your Lord card with that game, that can kind of pigeonhole into one sort of tactic. I love that game, but you can definitely get pigeonholed. Whereas, with these point salad games, you can get your points however you want, really, like you were saying.
Yeah, Lords of Waterdeep is definitely one I do not like. What you said is exactly why I don't like it.
Yeah, but again, the point salad games, I think it's a ton of replayability. So.
Oh yeah, because think about this. Maybe you have gotten down a certain way of playing, like you really learned that way of winning or getting points that way, but maybe you need to augment that with a little bit of something, because maybe you're playing a really good guy and he really knows the game, and so maybe you need another little way of gaining points, so therefore now that boosts you. So it's really nice to have that varied way of gaining points. I mean, honestly, point salad is a huge thing in my book.
I agree, completely agree.
And that word of the day.
And now it's time for our main topic.
That's right, Elise. Now we're on to our main topic. Today, I thought we would do I don't want to say a special episode, but an episode a little different than we normally do. I thought it would be kind of interesting to focus on one particular type of game, and that is Nothing Personal. I know that some podcasts out there have covered this game, but because the Dice Tower is, Tom Vassell had his hand in making this game, he kind of stays away from it. So you don't hear a lot about it, and I think there's a lot of podcasters out there and gaming experts that don't want to touch it because they don't want to feel like they're homers to Tom Vassell or they're just stroking Tom Vassell's ego. But I personally thought it's probably one of the best games of 2013. I've been blessed to have Ben here to bring his game every time he comes to the game store, so I'm able to try this game. And let me tell you, almost every time we played this, I've had an awesome time with it. Ben, why don't you jump in and tell us your thoughts about the game?
Yeah, my initial thoughts. This is a great game. Area control game with a mobster theme, and it's some of the best components I've ever seen in a game.
Oh yeah.
The card stock is like the money pieces, super thick cardboard.
Yeah, that's
it's not
nice,
just
isn't it?
Flimsy Monopoly money. It comes with solid metal coins for a couple of the different pieces, and it comes with a metal ring to wear, like if you're the capo, head mobster.
A pinky
ring.
ring.
Put it on your fingers. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's not one size fits all really, but just the quality of the components, it's amazing. I mean, the box itself is just heavy duty. It's not some flimsy one. It's just going to fall apart. So they really went above and beyond. And I think it's, for $60 on Amazon right now. So
really,
it's about your typical board game price. So
actually, it's a little high for most people once they get shipping and all that, but still, it's worth every penny. And I wrote up a review on Amazon because oftentimes you won't get real good reviews on Amazon regarding board games. Usually everyone that's in the industry goes to BoardGameGeek.com, and that's usually where they get their reviews. So I thought, I like to do reviews on Amazon because more of the average Joe will go there because the average Joe doesn't know about BGG.
Yeah, that's true, Rob. You mentioned the price on Amazon right now. It's $63 with $34 shipping. That's ridiculous.
It is because you're buying it from Game Salute, and Game Salute's some of their warehouses where they keep their products way up on the Northeast. I don't think Amazon actually has any in their warehouse. They go through Game Salute to do that, and that's why it's so expensive. When I bought my brother his copy, I knew my brother would love it. Because in many ways it's like Junta. You and I played Junta when my brother came to Arizona from California. And it felt a lot like that game. I think Nothing Personal kicks the pants off of Junta. Obviously, they can do a lot now with components. The quality has gone up just in general. But this Nothing Personal, I think, brings a new level, I think, this type of game. The two makers of the game, Tom Vassell and Steve Avery. Now, Tom Vassell, I think, had the idea, but I think he needed Steve's help to make this game a reality. Basically, you were talking about that it's an area control game, and I was going to add to that, it's a negotiation game. In fact, in fact, I would say that's its strongest suit.
Yeah, and if you can play this game without the negotiations, and it's not as much fun. Once you get those negotiations in there, this game that's where it really shines for sure.
Right, and I can't imagine playing without it, to be honest with you.
I've done it, and it's fine. It's a very serious game at that point, and it's still fun, but it's much better when you've got people who are really getting into it, really wanting to be mobsters and, talking with the accents and making demands of people. It gets a lot better.
I think what ends up happening at times, and I remember when we were playing with Brad, he was actually talking with a little bit of an accent, and I was totally cracking up at him. I was like, I didn't know he was from New York.
Yeah, you get those accents in there, and the guys who really, get into it makes it a lot more fun. So.
Now, this game supposedly plays, I believe, from 3 to 5. I don't remember what the box said, if it was 3 to 5 or it was 2 to 5.
It's definitely 3 to 5.
Yeah, and we played 3 to 5 once at your house, and it didn't work, in my opinion.
Yeah, we played with 3, and it wasn't quite as good as it should have been. I agree.
Because
I played with 4 and I played with 5 also.
Yeah, 4 and 5 is okay. The more players, the better. And I think if they had a 6 player, that would even be better. Because what's happening is, and for those of you who have not played Nothing Personal, it's not a very widely distributed game. Ben, you and I talk about just a little bit about how to play this game. Full rules rundown. But Ben, why don't you jump in and tell us just some basics of gameplay?
Right. So, like you were saying, Rob, this is an area control game. The games usually last 90 minutes to 2 hours, kind of depending on how many people have played before, how long you have to spend explaining
Right.
it. It's an area influence, like you were saying, game where you have a pool of influence, each player does, and you're putting them out on this pyramid of mobsters, and the mobsters are able to do different things, and whoever has the most influence on them gets to control that mobster for that round. And the whole idea is that the more mobsters you control, the more respect you gain, and whoever has the most respect at the end of the game wins the game. So it's all about making negotiations, promises, betraying people, whacking other gangsters, making a move on guys, and trying to be the capo. And also trying not to get arrested.
And one of the things that people have complained about with it is that, this is a mafia game. There should be more killing, but I would disagree with that. I would say that in reality, there's not as much killing going on with a mafia game. I mean, okay, not with a mafia game, but in real life, because if you think about it, most of those guys, they're throwing their weight around, trying to make people, either agree with them or make deals with people, and it's all sort of illegal, but it doesn't necessarily make them murderers necessarily, even though I'm sure they wouldn't have no problem doing that. But it's not, I don't think it's as common as we think it is in real life. I think the movies have, and again, don't get me wrong, I am not by any means saying that the mafia and all this kind of underworld activity is okay. I'm just saying that people complaining about that, to me, is a weak argument. This is not a killing game.
Right.
This is an area control game through negotiation. And
Right, exactly. This is a negotiation.
Yeah, and that's the fun of it. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, if you want a killing game, there's other mafia killing games out there that are much different. And just like you were saying, I think you were going to say, the fun part about this game is the interaction and the different mechanics without having to kill a bunch of people.
And in my review that I wrote up on Amazon, I said, if you can understand that, if you can get the whole premise of that, you'll have more fun. If you're focused on just killing people, go play Call of Duty or something. Now, I do have to remind our listeners that there is a bit of a delay between myself and Ben here. So sometimes Ben will jump in too late, or I'm waiting on him. So we apologize for that sort of. But let's go back to the game real quick. One of the things that's really interesting and fun about it, you have a certain number of round little cardboard tokens, and you put them on the different characters, and you control it.
Right. So I think what you're talking about is you get your tokens out there and you still don't control anybody. Is kind of what you're saying? Is that?
Well, yeah, because what could ultimately happen is that first game I played, I was hell bent on getting the capo. And so I put all of my tokens, and then I couldn't do anything else for the rest of the round. And not only that, but I got some points, some influence points, because the capo has a lot, but it wasn't enough to sustain me. And what happened is that once the capo was taken out, Brad, in this particular first game that I played, moved up from a character down below, and he controlled most of the board because he had a greater perception of the game. I guess perception would be the wrong word, but he had a greater idea of what it was. It's area control, and so he was spreading it out, Brad has a really good handle on this game. Every time I've seen him play, he's done really well.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this is a game I've never won. I've played it, half a dozen, if not a dozen times, and I still have not won this game. And I keep getting it out because it's so much fun.
Right.
Yeah, and there's some guys who just sit down and they love it and they pick it up right away and they win. So I don't know.
Right.
Some people have that eye for it, I guess.
And that's it. We could argue that about any game, that some guys just have a knack for one particular game or another. The reason why I love this game is because I get to interact with people, and I get to say, hey, Ben, I'll give you a certain this action or that action. You put your influence here, and I'll help you and all that. That's what I love about it. That's what I love about negotiation games, and the more I play negotiation games, the more I love them. And my personality lends itself to those kind of games.
Right. Now some downsides before you think this game is perfect. Like you were saying, Rob, there's no murdering. There's very limited murdering, no killing. It can go a little bit long as far as games go.
Right.
Half an hour to 2 hours, and for the first playthrough, maybe even 2.5 hours.
Right.
So it can be a little bit long. And really, I noticed this, and also it's kind of on the forums on Board Game Geek, that if you fall behind early, it's kind of tough to catch up.
It is tough, but it's not impossible. If you have done a little reading and a little research into the game,
No, it's not impossible.
It's not impossible. And what I've noticed is that when you play, getting focused, like I told you before, getting focused on one character or getting focused in one area of the game can kill you. You have to be cognizant of the entire board.
Right.
And Brad has a really good vision for that. He really does. He may not say it, he may not verbalize it, but that's what's going on. He can visualize the entire board and see the bigger picture. Now,
Right.
Now this game, I think,
those people who can do that.
Where it also lacks is when you have 3 players, and this is why. And I think any negotiation game you could potentially say that of. But in particular, suffers with nothing personal when you have 3 players, because this is what happens, and this is what happened with you and me when we were playing at your house. You get one guy that's starting to get a little bit of power, and he is starting to take over, and he's starting to get that runaway player kind of thing going on. And if on most games you need to negate that, and it's really hard to negate it, and some games have that and some don't. Now, in Nothing Personal's case, getting influence is really tough, and getting cards is really tough, and cards get you influence, and influence gets you control of the different characters on the board.
Right.
And you, as a group, if someone's breaking away, everyone needs to bond together to slow that person down, or if not, stop them. And when there's 3 people, you got one guy in there, and he's siding with one guy. The other guy's going to be left in the dust, and the other guy he's probably going to screw at the end of the game. So it really suffers with 3.
It does. Yeah, you have to have the right mix, and I agree. It plays best with 4 to 5. So.
When we first started talking about this game, one of the things that you had mentioned was great components. Now, let's quickly brush over this one more time before we move on. Now, the components, I would go so far as to say they have probably the best components of any game. Maybe I'm going out on a limb a little bit. For my short time in this hobby, I've seen about 200, 300 games now in my short time, because every time I'm out, I want to play something new so that I get to experience as much as possible and know and sort of fine tune and hone what I like. And this game literally has some of the best components I've ever seen in any game. And that even goes for those
For a game
collectible games even.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. For a game that's a standard edition of a game, the components are top notch, top quality, probably the best of any of them. It would be tough for it to compete with some of those collectible ones, but again, it's kind of up there along that collectible level, I think, as far as the components go, though.
The second thing I'd like to say about the components is that the artwork. Whoever they hired to this is an amazing artist. And I'm a graphic designer, and my wife is a illustrator. She graduated from college with a degree in illustration, particularly. I mean, the artwork, I'm hard-pressed to say what is a better... I mean, that's not like classical type paintings. Like if you look at games like Lord of the Rings collectible card game, it has that classical style on it. Beautiful. I love it. But this game has sort of almost a cartoon or illustrator style to it, and it's just really awesome. It fits the game perfectly. And I have to give props to Tom Vassell and Steve Avery for choosing this illustrator. Just phenomenal.
Yeah, it really is. It's well laid out. The board is easy to see, easy to read, and it has the right hints at the right places to kind of help remind you of what things do. And like you were saying, the artwork is phenomenal. I completely agree with that, Rob.
Now, from an artist standpoint, if you look at the color palette of each of the characters, it has a tendency to mimic 3 or 4 classes. I'm trying to remember now. It's been a while since I've seen the game. There's like 3 or 4 classes of characters. You've got the hitman, and each class has a certain little emblem, and then there's a color given to that emblem, and it's on the card, and it sort of matches that color. Whoever did not only the artwork, but the graphic design, you had touched on about the way that the board was laid out and all that. Graphic design, the way they laid out the cards, the backs of the cards even have that sort of old school 1950s gambling cards. They have that feel to them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, everything is really well thought out in this game.
Now, let's move on because we've spent a lot of time on this, which is fine. That's why we're having this episode today, is to talk about Nothing Personal. But let's move on because I think there's a few things we can touch on. For one, there's other games out there that have the same theme. Don Pepe, and I'm pronouncing that wrong, I'm sure. Gangsters, Chicago, Famiglia, Blood Feud in New York, Bootleggers, Cash and Guns. The question I have for Ben is, have you played any of these other games that I've just...
You know what, the only other one I've played is Cash and Guns, and a mobster game, in theory. And, you know, that theme doesn't really come across. It's more of a rock, paper, scissors sort of game. You kind of playing with a bunch of people, and everybody's doing rock, paper, scissors together. So pace it on theme of a mob.
Right. I was about to say, it sounds like it has a little bit of a pace it on theme there.
Yeah, I would completely agree.
Now, the game that I have heard...
So, and the other ones, no, I haven't played. Cash and Guns is a great game. Lots of fun, easy to pick up. Nowhere near the depth of Nothing Personal, and not even close to it being as fun, I would say.
Well, there was a episode on the Dice Tower where they talked about mafia or gangster games. Now, they left out Nothing Personal because, again, they don't want to give props to their own game there. But they had listed 2 games in particular, or 3 games: Cash and Guns, Bootleggers, and Blood Feud in New York. Those 3 were supposed to be the top 3 on their lists. And I think Cash and Gun was, I think, number 1 and number 2 with the 2 hosts. Bootleggers was number 1 and number 2, depending on the person who was saying it. Bootleggers is one I'd like to try, and it is supposed to be a really good game. It has great components. Of course, it has nowhere near as good components as Nothing Personal, I guarantee it. But I still would like to try it. Now, these games that I've seen, and I did a fair amount of research on them, they get fairly low ratings on Board Game Geek, and that's partly because they're kind of older games. I know that in our hobby, people have a tendency to be a cult of the new, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely the way games are going right now, with us being in this golden age of gaming. The new shiny things get a lot of attention.
And to some degree, that's not true, because I know that people have a tendency to, when they get a game that they really like, they sort of hold on to it and play it a lot, which is great. I'm glad they're having fun, but I have a tendency to not want to do that. I don't want to get burned out on a game, you know.
Right.
I have this tendency with hobbies that I even get scared about board gaming. I try not to do it too much. In fact, the last Thursday, I didn't even want to go but I went and we played Descent, and there was, you know, interaction between everyone. And that really is why I play board games, is because all of the people are so great and so gracious. With these games that I've listed, the gangster games, this is one I think we could have more of, this whole gangster thing. And if it's done right, I know it has kind of a negative connotation to say we're talking about illegal stuff, you know, and it's funny because it's such a great game.
Right, yeah, and you don't really feel like you're doing a whole lot of illegal stuff with this game.
Right, and I get the impression like this is kind of an extended family in a sense, and this
right.
and the extended family is turning on each other, and obviously you can't have, what is it, 200 character cards you have or something like this, or 100 character cards. I mean, you can't have I can't see a family being 100 people or 200. Maybe it could, but you know, males it is, because there's more males than there are females in the game. But still, it has that very light feeling. And that's something, I guess, before we get off the Nothing Personal topic, let's talk a little bit about mafia or gangster games, in particular Nothing Personal. Let's sort of quickly touch on the morality of this game. I mean, we kind of brushed on it a little bit, but...
you know what? This game has an interesting rule in it that no deals are binding. So you can make a deal with one guy that you're going to do something for him to help him out later on, and you can completely stab him in the back, and that's completely legit with the game. And it's an interesting mechanic, because I don't usually work that way.
Yeah.
But it's a fun mechanic to add, because it's something that I don't usually even ponder doing, of backstabbing people. So I think it's a cool mechanic to add. And as far as the morality behind the game, like, do I feel bad playing a mobster or anything like that? No, I think that's why we do games, is to kind of explore other things that we wouldn't normally be able to do. So
I know plenty of very moral people, religious people that have very high standards, that are actors and actresses, and they play people who are not moral. And then you could liken this to acting in a sense, because you are just exploring something. And in some ways it's good to have that perspective. I know that's a little bit of a stretch, but I would even go, it's good to get a little bit of perspective sometimes in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, granted, I was raised, from both my parents are from the Midwest. I mean, I know I grew up in California, but we were taught, both my parents are very strict evangelical Baptists. I grew up in a household and we went to church 3 or 4 times a week, and we were taught very strictly that your word is binding and you never stab anyone in the back. So playing this kind of stuff, part of me feels a little bit naughty.
Right. Yeah, and for some people that can be a draw to this sort of game.
Yeah, and maybe it's
something that you wouldn't do in real life, and that can be fun for that.
Right. Maybe it feels like it's kind of freeing, right? Like you wouldn't normally do that sort of thing. So just like acting, I would think in some ways is freeing. You can, being an actor, or actress, you can go out and do things you would normally not do.
Right. As long as you don't allow this to translate into your real life.
Right.
Oh, I get it. You want to be entertained some more, do you? Okay, well, let's just see what we can do here. Let's go with an off-topic.
We're going to move on to our off-topic. That's right. Our off-topic, we're going to be talking about happiness in gaming. And the things that I had heard a podcast talk about this recently, and they were joking around about it and talking about what kind of pleasure or what kind of happiness does gaming bring you, or does it give you a warm feeling, or whatever. I started thinking about that, and it kind of stuck with me over time, and I'm like, I need to bring that up in a podcast, and we need to explore that a little bit. And one of the things that sort of came up in my mind is that I had watched a documentary a while back on countries that have a happiness index. And now, as silly as that sounds, is something that leaders and people who are in groups or want to be around groups worry about. It's something that people who are leaders at a company worry about, because obviously you want your people to be happy. It makes sense that a president or leaders of a country are interested about as well. What would you say, talking about happiness? This is kind of a complex issue. It's not an easy one to sort of talk about, but what is your thoughts on?
I think that's a good question, Rob. That's a really tough. I don't have a scale per se. For me, I'm a guy who brings games a lot. I have a large collection, and I'm always teaching people. For me, when I see other people enjoying the game themselves, that's kind of my happiness index for a game. So, because I'm usually running the game or kind of the guy who knows who's brought the game, and so if other people are enjoying it, that's when I'm happiest.
Right, I've noticed that, and I've to give you a lot of credit, because that is a non-selfish behavior when you are interested in other people's happiness, and I commend you on that. I find myself at times being like that as well. When we have our game groups on the weekends, the Southwest Valley Gaming Group, and we have a group and everyone's laughing and we're serving, pretzels and drinks and people are giggling and having fun. It gives me great joy. It gives me great pleasure to see all that happening.
Right. As far as, for me, games that aren't boring, something that can hold my attention, that's usually my standard for a game that I'll play. I mean, I'll kind of play kind of anything and I'll be happy doing it. It's just if the other people around me are going to enjoy it and have a good time.
Sure, and I've been known to, when I'm with someone who doesn't maybe know the game very well, I'll have a tendency to throw the game at times. I mean, let's say everyone's probably done that. If you're a gamer, everyone's probably done that at one time or another, especially with people who you really care about.
Right. And I think that's a really good thing is games can definitely bring you together, especially husband and wife, or they can tear you apart if you find the wrong game.
This kind of goes hand in hand with throwing games in, because I love my wife, and if I find that she's getting a little too competitive with something, I'll just totally sit back and let her win, and it's fine. Because, I mean, let's face it, if someone's having a bad time with something, even if this person is a stranger to you and you don't have as much invested in them as you would your wife, even then, it's like you have a vested interest in everybody having a good time and doing well. Because let's say somebody isn't going to flip the table, but if they're getting really frustrated, that's not going to be fun for you either as the winner. I mean, who wants to win under circumstances that are less than happy, right?
Right. And that's exactly, on a game that I bring, there's that stereotype that the guy who brings the game wins the game, and that happens a lot of time. I said with nothing personal, I've never won that game, and I'm the only one who's brought it. And I love it, because the people who play it love to play it. And I try not to get as intense into the games that I bring. Now, if somebody else is teaching me the game, I'm going to go all out and do my best to win that one. But.
Sure. I mean, we can talk about, in some regards, do we have responsibility to those people around us? Now, we've had a podcast in the past where Hans and I sat down and we talked about, how we should be behaving around other people, because it's funny because sometimes some of those barriers will break down. People are getting so competitive or they're getting so involved with the game that they start to sort of forget people around them. In my mind, we always have a responsibility, not just the people we're playing games with, but people on the street even, or people you work with. We have a responsibility to those around us. Now, I know it sounds like I'm on my ivory tower here or my ivory chair and wagging my finger at people, but that's not the point. I mean, the point is I'm saying that it's something that's always in my mind, that or the people I'm around, are they enjoying themselves? Are they happy? Because if I'm making someone around me unhappy or I'm not, I mean, it's not my job to make everyone happy in this world either. But if I can do something, little things, right? And it goes hand in hand with life. It goes hand in hand with the game world. Then that's something, and generally those are exceptions to the rule. I think most of the times when I've had a game out, usually everyone's having a great time.
Exactly.
Sometimes this happiness index that we're talking about right now, I find interesting because as my experience with this hobby has grown, so have my taste changed also, or my happiness index has changed. Because what interests you now isn't going to interest you in 10 years. Right. And that's kind of an interesting topic as well. Have you seen any changes since you first started, Ben?
And I think that's really interesting. I was thinking about this the other day that it used to be I only would play a heavy Euro and thought that was the only way to game, and I would try and get everybody I knew into a heavy Euro. Some of those Agricola, the Havre, some of those ones. And now, like we've been talking about, I've found that people enjoy, when people enjoy the games that I teach them, then I have a better time. So I'm looking for games and I think, my gaming group would enjoy this, rather than, this is a heavy Euro, I need to bring this to the table so that we can only play real heavy Euro games. So yeah, it's definitely changed, especially over the past couple of years, as I've been the one bringing more games to the table.
And it's funny that you should say that, because I have noticed myself, just a second ago, but I've noticed that myself, I like to have a few Euros. My wife had brought up to me when I was first starting to collect these games, she goes, you don't want to get just one particular type. You want to see about getting a wide, varied, or a balanced game library. You want to have a little bit of this, you want to have some party games, and so that way, you're not focused into one thing. And that also has to do with how much happiness you're bringing to others and yourself, because just like you said, not everyone's going to like a Euro. The games I've been collecting recently are games that, like you have been saying, that are good for lots of people. And later I can go home or I can call up a friend of mine or whatever, and we can play Mage Knight or some other game, just the two of us, and that's great. But when I'm in a large group like at Imperial Outpost, that's when I try to bring the stuff that everyone can play.
Right. Right, and I've noticed myself trying to get games that have a lot more player interaction. Playing a game of Dominion, which is a card game, is fine. A deck building game is fine, but there's not as much player interaction. Even with the player interaction decks built specifically for that, it's just not a whole lot of interacting. And it's almost like playing solitaire with a bunch of people.
Right.
So yeah, I find myself trying to find ones that have more interaction, like Nothing Personal, or like Space Cadets Dice Duel.
Yeah, that Dice Duel is awesome.
Yelling and screaming, and yeah. So the more interaction, I think, is adds to that happiness index for me too.
Exactly, and we could sit and talk about the way that a human being is designed. we're social beings. And because of that, I believe that game like Nothing Personal, negotiation game, or a party game is something that most people enjoy. I mean, if you look at some of the statistics on games being sold right now, party games kill everything else combined. And there's a reason for that. I mean, even children's game, you would think children's games would be a huge seller, and they do sell pretty well. And that's because happiness index and social go hand in hand, really. With that, we are going to close. I'd like to thank you, Ben, for coming on and dealing with all the technical issues. I had a good time. I hope you did too.
Yeah, my pleasure, Rob. Thanks for having me on here.
Right, and we'll try to do this again in the future. I hope all of you had a great time. We would invite you to come back for our next podcast, which will be Start Your Engines Formula Day, or Formula D for the newer folks. Have a great day or evening wherever you may be, and game on.
Thank you for joining the Huff-N-Stuff podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening and hope you can tune in next time. Huff-N-Stuff is brought to you by Southwestern Valley Gaming Group at swvalleygamingsgroup.webs.com. You can visit us on our webpage at huffnstuffpodcast.webs.com. That is HUFFNSTUFF podcast.webs.com. We love to hear from you, so leave us questions, feedback, or just say hi. As always, keep on smiling and game on.